Okay, so the title of today's Shiur, since I just returned from Morroco and will integrate some of that into our regular Shiur, we'll speak about the 3 weeks in Chodesh Tammuz, but as a way of introduction, the title of the Shiur is From the Mela to the Monarchs. Mela is the old Jewish quarters. In every city in Morocco, there was a Jewish quarter. And you could call it a ghetto, but it wasn't a ghetto. And the Jews were not forced into the ghetto. They chose to live there because they needed the protection of the local rulers from the population. And they gathered together, I'll explain that in a minute. Melach to the monarchs, the great ancient Jewish community of Morocco and its miraculous Torah sages and saints springs back to life in the 20th century. So let me see if I can explain that. I just got back from a week's tour of Morocco. We took a number of close friends, family members. And really the purpose of the trip, let me see if I can try my own recording here. Hold on one sec. We'll try it anyway. So the purpose of the trip was manifold, but for some of the people, they were very high-ranking business people who had a lot of experience in American political life on the highest level. I'm talking about Washington, D.C., congressional campaigns, AIPAC, and very active in the Jewish community and philanthropy, so it was a very special group. And I was tasked with putting together for them what would be both a fun vacation, because they were celebrating a business anniversary, and also they're my students, and I had spoken often about the rabbis such as the Orach Chaim HaKodesh, whose Yortzeit was this week on Thursday, 2 Tammuz. And the idea came up, why not go to that place? And we've heard about it from you. So I had the not so enviable task of putting together a trip that was going to be both ruchnius, gashmius, secure physically, enjoyable. There would be food. There would be but we had a lot of siyata d'shmaya, tremendous siyata d'shmaya. It was a wonderful, wonderful trip on every level, and so I'll share with you some of the core concept which I want to give over to you, and that's coming out today. There's a concept called the tzaddik, and then called the tzaddik emes. What is the difference between a tzaddik and a tzaddik emes? Well, we say Noach ish tzaddik. Noach was a tzaddik. That means that he is able to choose the right decisions in life. As we say, hu tzodek. He approaches the world of bechira, of tov v'ra, and he chooses tov. That's a tzaddik. He may not be perfect, may not make every single time the right bechira choice, but bigadol, he makes the right choices most of the time, and therefore he has a din of a tzaddik. This we learn from Rambam Hilchos Tshuva. This is the process. Each and one of us, once we get to Tammuz, we already start thinking about Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. What do we want? We want that we should be judged as tzaddikim. We ask on Rosh Hashanah that we should be written in the Sefer of the tzaddikim, la'alter l'chaim. What does it mean to be a tzaddik? We're such tzaddikim? The answer is the majority good. Majority good is already a tzaddik, right? Okay. But then there's something called a tzaddik emes, the true tzaddik. And that person has chosen so consistently good that they actually have become davuk, they become connected to the good, that the tov is their essence. Somebody wished me this morning, boker tov. What's the classic return statement? What do you say? Boker or. So somebody stopped me and said, do you know why we say boker or? So I'll ask you that question. Do you know why you say boker or? What do we say? Or, zarua, latzadik. So what's going on over here? So I said, we suggested the following pshat. A tzaddik always sees the light, sees the good in everything, right? That's the classic example of Rabbi Akiva that we learned from Churban Bais Rishon. This is the period of the tkufa of the 3 weeks. So what was that? Rabbi Akiva's response was always positive. He said, if I see shualim holchim bo, that the base of English was destroyed, and it's little foxes like we have here in Beit Shemesh, right? Now they chased them away with the building, because that's what happens. When it's built up, they run away. You don't hear that woo every single night, like out your window, like I used to. Because the building chases them away. But what if it's not built up? What if it's churban? Then they all come in. And that's what they saw. And Rabbi Akiva's response was, no, if this nevuah has been niskayim, I'm very optimistic the next nevuah of Od Yeshvu Zakenim and so on, this will be all, we'll see Bechusos Yushalayim, Kol Sosim, Kol Simcha, that's also coming. That's the tzaddik emes. Tzaddik emes can only see good. Can only see good. There is no ra. It's almost like there's no bechira for that person, because they constantly only see tov. And therefore, Avram Avinu is the first tzaddik emes, because he saw the good in every individual and tried to draw out from them their appreciation of Hashem, which is the or. So when you say Boker Tov to somebody, and you respond Boker Or, what you're really saying is that I hope that you see this day as only Tov. You know, because if it's Boker Or, then there's only Tov. So we're really wishing, I wish you a good day. Well, how long is that going to last? Till I get to work? Until I get home? Until I see my wife? Until I see my kids? How long is that going to be Tov? And then it's going to switch. No, Boker Or. It should only be Tov. You should only see the Tov. And when a... Ashrecha Rabbi Akiva. Of course, well, certainly that's what Rabbi Akiva is all about. He only saw Lifnei Mi'at HaMetar Eschem. He said, look, Klal Yisrael, maybe you're not, but there's an option of Tahara. That's why we quote Rabbi Akiva at the end of the Mishnayos of Yuma about Yom Kippur, where we want to be judges Sadiqim. He says, no, it's a big deal. Hashem is going to help you. Ki Hashem HaTov. Now, this translates in a number of ways. First, I'll tell you about Morroco, and then we'll go on to Tammuz and a little bit the Parshat, if we can get there. A tzaddik emes is Avram, is the model. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaacov, of course. Their job is to draw out the good in every circumstance. Not just to choose good, right? But to see that Tov prevails. That's their job. Mm-hmm. So if a tzaddik emes sees someone who's not holding by Torah mitzvos, or is even antagonistic towards Torah mitzvos, what's their approach to that person? Are they saddened? Are they angered?
No.
Not at all. They say this person has 5 levels of his neshama, right? Naran is the last 3 is nefesh, ruach, neshama. That's in our lower world. We have those 3 elements, but there's 2 parts of our neshama, 40%. See, which is, we get a 40% start. So all we have to do is 1 out of 3. You know what I'm saying? Hashem makes it easy. I'll give you 40% to start with. Now you just got to get to 61, all right? Or to 51. You don't need to get all the way that way, right? So the 2 parts of the neshama, this Chai Yechida, don't even descend into this world. They're ultimately bound into the Kisei HaKavod, Jewish souls. So how could a Jewish soul be bad? 40% of them is perfection, is godliness. So that's how a tzaddik emes looks at a situation. Now, because the tzaddik emes is so connected to Hashem, Hashem allows them, this is a very important concept, he kind of throws them the keys of this world. What does that mean? I'll give you an example. Yaakov Avinu, who was certainly in that category of tzaddik emes, when he comes back to Eretz Yisrael from the house of Lavan, who was no great tzaddik, right? And yet he was able to pull out of the house of Lavan all the good, all his wives, the children, the tzvatim. Mamish, it's unbelievable that he went into a place of evil, ultimate evil, and drew out all the good. That's the job of a tzaddik emes. He comes to Eretz Yisrael, and he builds a mizbeach. What is the name of that mizbeach? It says in Pasuk, Vayikra lo Keil Elokei Yisrael. He names the mizbeach after the name of Hashem. Vayikra lo Keil Elokei Yisrael. Keil is one of the names of Hashem, the God of Israel. Great. But Rashi brings down Maimer Chazal and says, no, that's not the only pshat. Who's talking here? Yaakov or Hashem? Now, if Hashem is talking, what is Hashem saying? Yaakov comes in and he builds a Mizbeach. Now put it in the words of, if in the words of Yaakov, it's Vayikra lo, Yaakov called the name of the Mizbeach Kelokei Yisrael. What if Hashem is speaking? Vayikra lo, what is Hashem saying? Kelokei Yisrael. He's calling Yaakov by the name Kel Elokei Yisrael. Kel Elokei Yisrael. And he's making Yaakov into a god. The answer is he's transferring onto Yaakov Avinu the power, godlike powers, which is what? Hashem is the master of the universe. He can do to the world what he wants. What do we say about Hashem in Shemona Esrei? What is Hashem? Ata Gibor, Yolam Hashem, Mechaye Meisim Ata, first of all, Tchios HaMeisim, Rav Lo Shia, you can save people from danger, right? Somech Noflim, Rofei Cholim, all those powers become transferred to the real tzaddik emes, which is why the Gemara tells us that the smallest of the Tanoim had the power of Tchias HaMeisim. Why is that? Because they have become so bound up with Hashem. Their essence is Kulo Tov. So Hashem says, I trust you. I trust you. You're managed. And why? Because on a deeper level, as Ramchal says, Hashem wants us to experience the joy of being like Hashem. When we're like Hashem, we're happy. We're happier. When we're in a position to bestow good upon others and benefit others and heal others and support others, and we do it, we feel good. Why do we feel good? Because there's only simcha in front of Hashem. It's when we are frustrated and angry and blocked from Hashem that all the bad feel. When we fall into the choshech of Ra. And that's what this period of 3 weeks is really all about. Is the Hester Panim. That we fall into the choshech. As it says in Megillah Seicha, that we sat in the dark, Kimesei Olam. So death is the separation from Hashem. Choshech is the separation. Hence, the Bnei Yissaschar says that the 2 months of Tammuz and Av represent, according to the Kabbalah, the 2 eyes, right eye, left eye, or the ability of sight and the ability of hearing. Those 2 senses. Why? Because in that month, what big sin took place that we've been suffering from the Churban ever since, and it happened in the month of Tammuz and Av, way back in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, the Meraglim. They traveled in Tammuz and they reported in Av. Right? They left Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, and they came back Tisha B'Av. And what was the problem with that? What they saw, they didn't see properly. They saw it as bad when they should have seen it as tov. It's tov ma'od. The land is very good. Only see good. And then when they came back, they gave a dibat ra. They ruptured the idea of shmiya by speaking lashon hara. So those 2 phenomenon are the furthest thing. Are when you drift from the tzaddik, not tzaddik emes, but just from a regular tzaddik, means that your outlook on life and what you're saying and hearing have been mikulkal, have drifted into the ra. And that's why these months are very, very, very susceptible to that. And the 2 Nisiyim that according to the Kabbalah are assigned to these months, every month has a shevet. You know that? Every month is assigned a certain shevet that their job is to perfect that month, to bring it to the good. Who was assigned Tammuz? Reuven. This is all in Bnei Yissaschar, by the way. This is all from the Bnei Yissaschar's Maimer on Tammuz and Av. Reuven and Shimon. Reuven and Shimon. Reuven corresponds to Tammuz. Shimon corresponds to Av. Now that's hard. Shimon really, really, really in a bad place. Tough place. Place of Churban. Says the Bnei Yissaschar, so we saw the problem of Re'iyah and Shmiya come out immediately, even in the times of Moshe Rabbeinu. And even in the lifetime of Moshe Rabbeinu. Why? Because what problem did Reuven create right away? Where was Reuven involved in a big Aveira rebelling against Moshe Rabbeinu? Because they were part of Korach rebellion, Dasan and Aviram. Okay, and also the Nasi of Reuven was involved. What were they contesting? They were contesting, among other things, Moshe's leadership and Aaron's leadership, right? So they said, they're not our leader. What do you mean? These are the Tzaddikei Emes. This is exactly what we need. And they're saying, no, we are the firstborn, and we are the ones, we're not satisfied with what we see. We want, now, let me get one step deeper. Everybody knows that if you look in the Sephard Siddur and you daven Musaf, you'll say, Baruch, in Musaf, of Rosh Chodesh, you'll say, Baruch Ata Hashem, right? Mekadesh Chadashim, right? That's the bracha. But the name of Hashem has 12 different permutations. Did you ever notice that in a Sephard Siddur? It's Yud Ke Vav Ke this way, then it's Hey Yud, and then Vav Hey, and then with all sorts of punctuations.
That's only the Sephardim?
In a Sephard Art Scroll Siddur, you'll see it. They print it for you. In a regular, in Ashkenaz, they don't have it because it's plain Nusach Sephard should have it. If you go to a Nusach Sephard Art Scroll Siddur, you'll see it, and you're supposed to have intention for the name of Hashem that represents that month, because that's the avoda, our work in that month. What is the permutation of Hashem's name for Chodesh Tammuz? You'll never believe where it comes from. It comes from Haman. What does Haman say when he comes out and spies Mordechai sitting at the gates of the palace after his first party, his drinking party, with Mordechai and Esther?
So that everything that I have is like nothing, but
Correct.
because he doesn't bow, this one guy doesn't bow to this. That's the sin of the Gan Eden.
Correct. So what is that in Hebrew? In the language of the Megillah, Kol Zeh Eineno Shove Li. Write that down. Kol Zeh. Now start from the word Zeh. What's the last letter of Zeh? Hey. Eineno, last letter, Vav. Shaveh, last letter, Hey. Li, last letter, Good. That's the spelling, and the way it's punctuated is the source for Chodesh Tammuz. What in the world could that mean? Why would we allow Haman to provide us with an insight about the name of Hashem that's associated with Kedusha, ultimate Kedusha? Okay. So, the answer is that is exactly the problem of Chodesh Tammuz. I see Kol. Kol b'gematria is how much? 50. How many levels of wisdom are there? 50. Who is the Adam who reached the highest level of wisdom? Moshe Rabbeinu. I see Moshe Rabbeinu. I see the Tzaddik Emes. I see Mordechai, right? And I don't accept him. I reject him. And I say about my life, I have everything. Look what Haman, can you recount what Haman had? What did Haman have? What were some of the things that Haman was blessed with? Incredible amount of money. What? 10 sons, who all were following in his wonderful ways, who all of which were helped to be responsible for the stopping of the work on the Beis HaMikdash. Ironically, Haman and the Beis HaMikdash are uniquely positioned because it was Haman who, as a legislator in the Persian kingdom, stopped the work of the Beit HaMikdash that had been endorsed by the Persian monarch Koresh. We'll talk about monarchs in a minute. The good king Koresh had allowed the Jewish people, had demanded of the Jewish people, was much more than a Balfour Declaration. He said the Jewish people have to go back, and he said that the people of his country have to give them money. He assigned money from his royal treasury, taxes or whatever, to help support the Jews to build the Beit HaMikdash. He was actually made donations, even if they were negative donations, what he gave from tax allowances, tax breaks or whatever. You build the Beit HaMikdash, you can take it off on your 1099. Because the Persian made a donation to the Beit HaMikdash. He gets a receipt for tax purposes, among other things. He sees that and says, this is not good. I do not want Hashem's presence in the world. I kol ze eino shaveh, eineno shaveh, li. Who counts? Me. I was given great wealth. I was given 10 sons. Was he given honor? I mean, the whole kingdom bowed down to him, save one person. That's pretty good. Nope, not good enough. Because that is the nature. If it's about Li, if it's about me, it will never be good enough. We will fail to see the good. If Haman was smart, he would have just smiled at Mordechai, and in the end, what would have happened to the Jewish people? But because he couldn't tolerate the presence of the Tzaddik Emes, that was his undoing and downfall. And therefore, Haman's not all bad, because he helped us a lot. helped us a lot. All of his money went to where? The Beit HaMikdash. Exactly what he didn't want to build. You ever think about that point? Haman and his 10 sons did everything in their power to prevent the building of Beit HaMikdash. Who ends up funding it all? Haman. A big plaque. Big plaque he got. Okay.
Also built the gallows that he was hanging
And the gallows that he was hanging on as well, right? And how high was those gallows? How high were those gallows? Chamishim ama, like the word kol. Now, when we were in Morocco, we went to a number of these tzadikei emes. Now, when there's a real tzaddik emes, then people like Koresh recognize it. They recognize it. And the Muslims over there, dating way back to the beginning of the history of that country, from Churban Bayit Sheni, from the time of Churban Bayit Sheni, here we are in Tammuz, the Jewish people began to make their way from Yerushalayim and those areas of the Middle East towards Morocco. Why? Because the Romans conquered. And remember how many Jews were taken into slavery by Rome? A tremendous amount. If you look in Josephus, you'll see what they had taken as slaves. So many Jews were sold into slavery. But otherwise, the survivors somehow started to make their way across North Africa towards a brand new country. The Jews are always good in new countries, you know. We're always good for startup. That's what we're good about. So in the first century, second century, Morocco was not much. The only people there were Berbers. Berbers is a name given to them by the Romans. It means what? Barbarians. Barbarians. The Berbers are barbarian. They lived in the deserts of the Atlas Mountains, Sahara Desert. Morocco is an incredibly beautiful country. It has mountains. It has the mountain range. Famous mountain range is called the Atlas Mountain Range. Who's Atlas?
Greece.
Yeah, so where do you think they got that name from? From the Romans. The Romans named those mountains the Atlas Mountains, that they were like literally holding up the world. Maybe because it was the edge of civilization at that point. Could be. Because remember, Morocco takes you all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. It's fascinating. It has Mediterranean Sea on the north and Atlantic Ocean to the west. And the Jews came, and with them came great tzaddikim. Often as emissaries from the religious communities in Israel and Bavel to collect money, which was always the way things were going back to the 6th century, 7th century, 8th century, 9th century. The Gaonim in Bavel were the religious authorities of the world, and people would send questions, and they saw the Gemara was based in Bavel, Iraq, and emissaries would go to collect money for the yeshivos and connect to Jewish communities and teach halacha to them, and that went time immemorial. So I was actually privileged to go to a kever of a tzaddik named Davidu Moshe. Davidu Moshe is a place where Muslims and Arabs alike would go for bracha. Because again, what's in the hands of the tzaddik emes? Tchias hamesim, refuah, children, because that's also a form of tchias hamesim, right? Protection from harm. And when anybody had a real problem, they would go and they would daven there. They would light a candle there and daven. So I'll tell you one story right away from that place. We had a tour guide. His name is Rafi El-Maliach. Rafi El-Maliach is the single expert on Moroccan Jewry. He's a Moroccan-born fellow. He must be around 50. He still lives in Morocco, in Casablanca. And he devoted his life to researching the communities of these great tzaddikim. And the way it works in Morocco, which was not unique to Jewish history, was that there were many Jews that lived in villages, small villages. The Atlas Mountain is filled with villages. You'd have 100 people there, and you'd have 20 Jews. But the 20 Jews, or 300 people there, and 50 Jews, they built themselves a little quarter. They all lived together in the Mela. Now, why is it called the Mela? The word salt. Because salt was the ultimate commodity in that part of the world. Why? Of food. Because if you don't have salt, you die, because there's no food preservation without salt. Even today we saw how they shechted one like cow if you're a Jew, camel if you're not, and they would preserve the meat for an entire year. And that's what they ate for a year. Okay? And if you didn't have salt to make that mix. Anyway, so the melach, and it was also used for medicinal purposes. So not only for food, but for medicine. Those are the two things, like we said. Who gets trusted with that? The tzaddikim. The local rulers all trusted the Jews, and also because it was quid pro quo. The masses would probably slaughter them if not for the protection of their local rulers. So the Jews built their quarters right next to the Medina. The Medina was where everybody lived, the other people lived, and the ruler had often a walled city, which was called the Medina. So they have walled cities there. We saw walls that were remnants from the 12th century. And the bigger ones are from after the Spanish expulsion. There are two types of Jews in Morocco, I learned. The original Jews, what they call the Berber Jews, because they came in the 1st century, 2nd century, 3rd century, 4th century. Islam only came in the 9th century. The Jews were there for a long time before Islam. And the official flag of Morocco, the original flag, till the modern era, until the French Yamach Shemam interfered, was a Jewish star. Because what other religion did they know? Berbers were pagans. And they met the Jews and they became Jewish, to whatever extent they became Jewish. And they lived, and even if they didn't become Jewish, they respected the Jews and revered their rabbis. So this Raphael Maliach went from Melach to Melach and uncovered genizas with treasures. He even found a handwritten thing from the Rambam. Unbelievable. Because the Rambam did live in Fez, in the city of Fez. We saw the house where the Rambam lived for several years. Unfortunately, it's a Chinese restaurant now. But it has the Rambam's picture on it. And we saw the University of Kairouan, which today is only an Islamic university, but the original medieval university in Marrakesh. Marrakesh is where the Rambam lived, not Fez. Marrakesh was the seat of, it was before Oxford and before Cambridge. It was founded, it's an early medieval university, the greatest in the world. And we learned that the Rambam actually gave lectures there. And he dressed like everybody else dressed, simply. They wear jabaliach. A jabaliach is a big shmata. And it's exactly how the Jews dressed in the times of the Mishnah. In fact, we saw there the crafts in the old Melech, which is being restored, and I'll get to that in a second, weaving exactly the way the Mishnah describes it in the laws of what? In the laws of Shabbos. We know there's 39 malachos in laws of Shabbos, and they're broken into categories. One set is making of wool. That's a set of malachos. The description is something called bate nirim. These are the frames that go up and down with a pedal and a shuttlecock. It's exactly how it was in the times in the Mishnah. Nothing automated, all manual, no electricity, no nothing. And we also saw them making leather, and I got my wife a really nice leather bag. 2, as a matter of fact. Gorgeous, gorgeous things. But they had a tannery as described in the Mishnah. They would take the skins from the slaughterhouse and cover them with salt. That's one of the 39 malachos. And then ma'abe, they would soak it in a combination of things, including pigeon droppings, which is not so nice, which is why it doesn't smell so great. And the halacha tells us that if a Jewish man decides to be a tanner, his wife can divorce him. And they used to have to stand in the back of the shul, because a lot was done with the process of tanning involves some ingredients that are not so Gan Eden-y. Okay, so we saw it all as it was. Remarkable thing. So this Raphael Maliach wrote a book. If you're interested, it's worthwhile reading. It's called Jews Under the Muslim Sky.
Rabbi, I learned yesterday that those Jews were they excused them or were they?
Yeah, nobody wanted them there. Get them out. You ruin it, the whole thing. Really, it smells unbelievable. They give you mint leaves to stick up your nose. Yeah, it's like besamim, just to walk around. You cannot breathe otherwise. But we saw the entire process exactly as the Mishnah outlines it. It was remarkable. I wish I would have had a class there of 8th graders, or whatever it was. I could have shown them Hilchos Shabbos. Mamish. In any case, this is how ancient the community is, how they dressed, and they were very religious. The Berber Jews. Very religious. I even met a woman there on Shabbos. We had a big gathering in the Chazan of Marrakesh, who restored one of the old shuls worth going to. It's called the El Zama Shul, which is on the Rehov Talmud Torah. And these little ghettos are like the streets are about as wide as this table from here to here. That's what it is. Buildings, and you walk through narrow streets. It's only the ones that were built after 1492 that are wider. They brought in the Spanish architecture, but the old Moroccan architecture, very, very narrow. That's where the Jews lived. They had 400 kids in the Talmud Torah. This is before. No, not now. This is what, right before, I'm talking about in the 50s. In about 45, 48, around the time, the beginning of the State of Israel. 400 kids in the Talmud Torah crammed in a room. They would learn everything by heart. A woman I met there says her mother sent her to sit in the Talmud Torah with the boys because they gave them food. So she learned. She knows Shiur and Baal Peh. She knows most of Tehillim Baal Peh. She knows Chumash Baal Peh. That's what they learned, Bereishis, Bar. Then we bang it into the kids' heads. They sat there, these little kids with the jabaliachs and the sandals, and they learned Torah, B'kedusha B'tara. We even saw a little restored synagogue that had this mikveh, little tiny mikveh. It was amazing how they lived. The real authentic Yiddishkeit, untainted by modern world, until the French came in 1912. Now, let's get to the tzaddikim. So, some of the family of tzaddikim that really interested me most was that of the Abba Chatzera clan, which of course you have the famous Baba Sali here in Israel, and the Or Chaim HaKadosh, who was of Moroccan origin, who was here in the 1740s, was here only for a couple of years in Yerushalayim, but restored and gave a spark to Jewish life in Yerushalayim that has not been extinguished. His yeshiva started the learning of Kabbalah, but also the learning of Torah, and his Perush on Chumash, which was written on his way to Eretz Yisrael, became a mainstay of teaching the Torah according to more of the inner insight, which is very popular today. So in a sense, he was one of the first modern scholars, which is why his words are being translated into English in 2018. Just recently, and annotated, and everybody's studying Or Chaim HaKadosh. He became, and the Baal Shem Tov was in love with Or Chaim HaKadosh. He considered him his superior. There's a lot of stories about that. And he saw himself as the immediate successor to the Or Chaim. When Or Chaim HaKadosh died in 1743 in Eretz Yisrael, the Baal Shem Tov said, Kaba Ner HaMaravi, the western light has gone out. Western meaning Morocco, which is in the west. So these two great luminaries always intrigued me, the Or Chaim HaKadosh, who writes extensively about the Geula process, which we've been talking about nonstop, and also, of course, the Abu Chatzeras. And this goes back to around 15 years ago, maybe more. A dear friend of mine told me that there's a segula from the Baba Sali that I'll share with you to start off your week, to get your week going towards the Tov, right? You want your week to be Tov. Hamavdil ben Kodesh L'chor, Chol, ben Or L'choshech. You want Boker Or. How do you get your week off to the right start? Eat Malaf Malka. And when you bench, light 4 candles. 3 regular candles